coming from like a STEM background, and that's incredibly gatekeepy.
Yeah.
Before I even started streaming, I was pretty active in the scientific communication space within like computer science and like chemistry. Most of my friends are also like soft and have like cute aesthetics, but they're in those spaces and really work hard at um, opening up that space to all kinds of people. And that's really what is like the driving force behind what it is that I do. I'm like, oh, I can do that in the gaming space. Like I did it, in those spaces, and my friends did it. So why not bring it here?
Hello, friends, and welcome to Gamers Gab, the podcast by gamers for gamers. I'm Artsy from the Artsy Gamer. I make art, I play games, and I encourage others to do the same. And joining me today for the big hype for the newest game in the Zelda franchise, Tears of the Kingdom, is Knimbley. Before we get into the conversation revolving not only this new game and just the Zelda franchise and Lorekeeping as a concept, Knimbley, if you would, give us a lovely introduction about your sweet self and your pronouns, please, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Artsy. So I'm Knimbley, your hyphen, comforting friend, and Lorekeeper. My pronouns are she, they. I do a lot of things. I'll try to keep this brief. I grew up reading a lot of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, so being brief is not my strong suit. But I am a scientist by day, streamer by night, and lover of high fantasy and dark fantasy the rest of the time. I started streaming back. Well, I've been online as on Twitch since about 2015, but I started streaming in 2020, playing like Dark Souls and Dragon Age. Those are two of my favorite games, and it took me a while to get to the Zelda series, but I think I've always had a love for storytelling, so that's how I ended up here today.
What a great segue, because I think a lot of people are not quite sure what Lorekeeping is. And I know that the Zelda franchise is not the only game that you do that for, but that's presently your focus. So what is Lorekeeping?
I'm glad that you asked. Okay, so Lorekeeping, it's not really an official term. Like, it's more of a, how do you say colloquialism? I don't know how to pronounce that word, but it's something that, it's basically understood in like the storytelling space, but it's not a real word. But the way that lore keepers function is, keeping the lore. So almost like a scribe, I think, would be something that people are familiar with, where you basically will take a deeper dive into the world building and character building and history, both real and fictional, for all kinds of series. And that could be with books, that could be with movies, but for the purposes of what I do, I focus on games, because I think, especially with role-playing games, a lot of them have so much richness to their story that I feel can be missed when we're just going through like a regular playthrough. And I really like, if I see an item, like I'm trying to think of like an example. That's like, if I see a mask for a character that I can equip, I'll go immediately to my inventory and look up the item description and like see where it was that I found it and see if I can trace it back. So it's almost like you're like a lore detective, trying to piece all those things together. And the keeping part of it is putting it into like a format that's accessible for people. So usually we'll do all the deep diving and staying up late at night and waking up like, oh my God, I just put this connection together so that we can share that with people who may not be as interested in doing that on their own. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Oh, it absolutely did, because I was thinking about the Dragon Age series when you were talking about it. That's one of my favorites as well, and I just like all of the links to the start towards the end of the saga. It's like, I still believe that the dwarves got the short end of that stick with the lore. I know, it's like, if you play one, no one wants to love you, which is really unfortunate because the dwarves are so fascinating. But anyway, I also apologize in advance that I pontificate and I get off topic, but when you were talking about Dragon Age, it just sent me back to like all the lore and obsession. So I absolutely can see how certain games just captivate your imagination, but what about the Zelda franchise captivated yours to become a lore keeper or a detective in finding out how all these games interconnect with the franchise as a whole?
Oh, this is a fun question. Also, I really want to talk to you about Dragon Age maybe after
Yeah,
this. Like we can pick
absolutely.
each other's
Yeah.
brains.
Yeah.
I love that series so much. But really, it started with I have been a gamer my whole life, and I played a little bit of Ocarina of Time when I was a
Hmm.
child, but I never really got into it because I didn't own it.
Hmm.
However, a little later in life, once I came back to role playing games,
Hmm.
I got, like I said, really into Dragon Age and Dark Souls, and Dark Souls was my main game for almost 10 years. Next year, it'll be 10 years
Wow.
of me playing FromSoftware games. And if anyone that's familiar with that series or maybe isn't, the storytelling is very opaque. Like you're not really sure what's going on unless you really pay very close attention. Even as far as doing quests, sometimes you can get lost, and it's hard to play those games without a guide. And I think
Hmm.
going through that and just interacting with the community around that, and seeing what people were able to put together got me interested in just a way of storytelling that wasn't typical for role playing games, because I think that especially with Dragon Age, it's a lot more linear. Like, of course, you can branch out into all these different paths, right? But you more or less know, like, okay, go here, interact with these people, and
Hmm.
then get the story. And Dark Souls is like the opposite of that. And I think that I didn't know what to expect for Zelda because I just didn't really know much about it. But I have a friend who I love so much, Amber, like love of my life. She's one of the first friends that I made on Twitch. Breath of the Wild is one of her favorite games, and she had been telling me for like months and months, like, Nim, like, you should try out Breath of the Wild. You will love it. Like, I know it's not as dark and like edgy as your FromSoft games, but I really think you love it. And I put it off for a long time because I have a Taurus moon and I'm kind of stubborn.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm just like, I know I would like this thing, but I don't like that people are telling me that I'll like it. So no. And truthfully, I had played a little bit of Breath of the Wild when I
Hmm.
first got my Switch. I rented it from a library, but it didn't really stick with me for some
Hmm.
reason. Like I'd only played maybe about like 10 or 15 minutes of it, and I was like, "Oh, I'd rather just go back and play Dark Souls." But I ended up doing a charity stream in 2021, December 15th. I'll never forget. Um, and the incentive, if we met our goal, was for me to start Breath of the Wild. So we did that. I ended up streaming for like 7 hours. It was
Wow.
so fun. And I wasn't even really focusing on the story, but I think that the gameplay really like sucked me in, and just being able to explore so openly, like it just felt
Hmm.
like a, like a breath of fresh air. And it took me quite a while to get to the point where, because it's open world, that I was able to make those interconnections with the story. And of course, like I mentioned before, that is something that I actually like, is being able to put those pieces together. But
Hmm.
it was once I made that click, I think I was have you played that game, by the way? I don't wanna spoil it
Breath
for
of the
you.
Wild.
Yeah.
No, I have not. We can get into that after because I had the same things where it's like Zelda has never. I hope this does not destroy our friendship, but Zelda
No, it's
has
okay.
never really appealed to me. I tell the story
Yeah.
about how I started my Zelda journey with a Game Boy Color, and I got so frustrated in
Oh,
the tutorial aspect that I was like,
yeah.
no. So
Yeah, no, I
I'm hyped
understand.
that other people are hyped, and I love watching other people play. So you can spoil it for me. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, no, and I totally understand, because that's the same way, Artsy,
Hmm.
that I felt about it too, and that's why I put it off. It's just I think I played a little bit of A Link to the Past,
Hmm.
on a redacted source, when I was in high school, and, yeah, I felt the same way. I was like, "Oh, this just doesn't it's not, like, sticking
Hmm.
for me." But when it did stick for me was when one of the main quest lines in Breath of the Wild is, um, kind of purifying these, divine well, they're called divine beasts, but they're almost like these mecha, animal creatures, and,
Hmm.
they've been taken over by the evil force Ganon, and you're supposed to, help and purify them. And I got really interested about the names of the divine beasts, because it just seemed like there was a theme to them, and some of the areas on the map seemed related to them, and I couldn't put it together. And of course, that made me really excited, right? Because I'm like, okay, they put this in there for a reason. Like, what does it mean? And I was asking my chat, like, is this a character in this game that I haven't met yet? And they were like, no, Nim, they're in an older Zelda game. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And then of course, that gets my little like FromSoft goblin brain going like, wait, there's connections that are like subtle, and I have to go and pick up all this stuff. Like, what the heck? And then I started really wanting to go and do some of the side quests, which again, that's something that is similar to FromSoft. And I guess I should pause here to make that connection, because I'm not sure if you've played any FromSoft, and I know you don't play the Zelda games, but we wouldn't have FromSoftware games without Zelda. So like making that, yeah. So the first two FromSoftware games were heavily inspired by Twilight Princess and I think Zelda 2. So when I was able to make that story connection and then the game development connection, I just fell in love, and I was like, all right, I'm in. What games do I got to play so I can understand this? And yeah, I think that happened almost a year ago is when my brain was like, okay, I'm obsessed with this series. And yeah, that's how I ended up here. I think I should pause there.
Yeah,
So I
no,
can answer that question.
So it also is really interesting that the appreciation with the Zelda series is revolving around the mechanics of the game design itself with FromSoftware. I also don't know what I am a fake gamer, so I have no idea what what FromSoftware is. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, like you were 100% real gamer. I feel very passionately about that. Like just coming from the FromSoftware community, it's very gatekeepy, and
Yeah.
I'm like the opposite of that. I'm like, no, like you will learn about these things that I like, even if you don't play them yourself. Like I want to share that because, like, like we're all gamers if we're gaming. So you probably didn't mean it that strongly, but I just
Oh,
want to
no,
put
no,
that
no,
out
it's
there.
it's a fair thing. I was joking, but I know
Yeah,
how gatekeepy it can be, and I know that Iona was saying that how elitist it can be by the fact that people can't afford games, and so they'll often use mobile games and everything. So it really depends. So that is totally my bad and absolutely correct, and I
not at
appreciate it.
all.
No, I appreciate that you brought that up. That's really important, especially for people who are femme-bodied or uterus having, that we are denied spaces in gaming, and so that's really important.
But so when I say FromSoftware, I think most people know like Dark Souls, like it's or Elden Ring. So those are those games, and they're known for their very vague but complicated storytelling, incredibly difficult mechanics, and all that stuff. And your question was about the development and how that was interesting to me.
How that led to your interest in the game itself, because that's really unique, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what's so funny is that I don't know very many people that started with FromSoft and then went to Zelda. Usually, most people that I know, even like one of the largest lore creators for FromSoft, I don't want to name drop people, but he grew up with Zelda. So I think even for people that are well in that space, like I'm kind of super late to the party. I didn't play Breath of the Wild until it had been out for what 5 or 6 years, and I played Ocarina of Time for the first, well, finished it, earlier this year in February. So that's been really cool, and I think it's given me like a much deeper appreciation for both of the series. Like just seeing, well, how do I put this? Like I'm so like excited to be talking about this. I think this is the first time that I've talked in depth about all of the series, but yeah, like it's so cool to go back and play the older Zelda games and see like these giant monsters and like giant like corrupted knights or suits of armor, and just be like, yo, like this is in Dark Souls. Or like seeing like there's this sequence in Twilight Princess where you have to go through almost like a I'm trying to think, like a Tomb Raider type of maze where um there's like all these rolling spiky things, and it's very like, I guess, Indiana Jones, where there's like these spiky like giant balls like rolling at you, and it's like super dangerous. And I'm like, dude, I saw this in Dark Souls 1. This is like Sin's Fortress, like, oh my god. And like, and just knowing that this is what inspired the series that I love so much, it just like I'm falling more in love with gaming, because, and that was really important. This is a little bit of an aside, but maybe it'll give like some context, I before I really got into playing RPGs seriously, this might be surprising to a lot of people that know me, but I was very, very much like a sweaty first person shooter person. I
Which
have
game?
all kinds of games. I grew up playing a lot of Unreal Tournament and Halo, and I have over 3,000 hours in Overwatch. So that's like that's like my jam. Like prior to coming back to RPGs.
Nice.
So it really helped because those spaces tend to be very toxic, and
Mm-hmm.
it was nice to like see like, oh, like I can be in a community that's really passionate and active and not get my feelings hurt by rude people, you know.
Yeah,
So that was really special. And I'm sure you know this just with like the podcast that you have, that gaming really can have like a deep impact on people and like give them that sense
absolutely.
of community. So
Yeah.
I hope that I go on so many
It's
tangents. So
okay.
really, yeah.
No, I think that's what I love about this is it's kind of like a coffee conversation where we bounce off ideas. So like please don't ever worry about like, you are doing great. You really are.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
so I guess it kind of answered like why the Zelda franchise really captivated your attention with linking connections to these games that you very much love. But
Mhm.
uh, why has it been important to you within the last year to act as Lorekeeper to the Zelda franchise?
So I think there are a few parts to that answer. I think the first part is just giving myself that space to take up space. I guess
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like I do like myself, but I have a hard time putting myself out there, especially expressing my ideas and without getting really self conscious about it. And I think that lure keeping has been a really accessible way for me to do that because I think, especially in the gaming space, there tends to be a lot of gatekeeping, especially in the lore space, because with a series as long standing as Zelda,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of theories that people have, and I think the prominent ones tend to take up the most space. And it really, in my experience, hasn't been the most welcoming to newer people to the franchise or people that have new ideas. Of course, you know, this is me making a sweeping generalization. There have
Mm-hmm.
been many like amazing, amazing people that I've met that have been super warm and welcoming. But I think just because the series has been around and there's been so long for people to establish what they think about the series, there can be like a wall that you hit when you're trying to learn things. And I really wanted to open that space back up to people that are newer because the way
Mm-hmm.
that I look at it is we should always be welcoming to folks. Like even as long as like I'm trying to think of we have a policy in my community. Um I can't remember how it's worded exactly, but we call it open lore. Like we're an open lore space and we say that let's agree as a community that as we explore the lore and rich history that brings us together, all of this should be available and open to communication, regardless of whether or not they are proven theories, to approach things with like kindness. Because I think when people are very passionate about something, I think that that can cause a lot of tension if there's something
Mm-hmm.
contrary to that. And I just wanted to make a space, even if it's just within my own community, where people from all different knowledge levels or skill sets can just come and vibe and talk about the series that we love. And two, there are a very small number of like marginalized lore creators online. I know that we exist. It's just as far as having a platform,
Mm-hmm.
there are very, very, very few of us. And that was something that really motivated me to like, all right, Nim, you got social anxiety, and yeah, you might feel like you're gonna cry when you talk about things, but you got to do it because you know that'll make it easier for someone else to want to do it, especially because my voice is not very loud. Like a lot of creators tend to be bigger personalities,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really yeah. I think it's just showing people that you don't necessarily have to be like big and bold. Like those people are great too. But that you can just kind of come as you are and with what you know, and you know, be everyone can be a lore keeper. I guess did that answer your question?
Oh, no, it absolutely did. I also
And
really appreciate that you come at inviting people to share their ideas because, as you said, it's very hard for voices who, in addition to social anxiety or perhaps just not feeling like they're particularly welcome in the gaming community, whether they are, uterus having or whatever, that it is really important to fill up space. And it's really cool how lore keeping has become this invitation for people to share their voices. And I think that's just a really cool idea. I really appreciate the impact that that has left not only on your life, but the fact that you kind of made a stand with the community and said, like, let's invite people to be part of this growing love of a specific game. And it just always amazes me how games like this really do impact lives and for the better, and just allows for people to become fully immersed in something that really enriches their life. So when it comes to like lore keeping, I remember that you were really excited about a book that came out recently about the psychology of the Zelda franchise. And I was wondering how, yeah, no, that one. And I was like,
yeah.
that, I have to say, Knimbley, that was the thing that was like, wait, there are books about games and how, and the impacts and like the interconnections of reality. And that's really cool. Like, I may not,
It's really cool.
yeah. So, did you finish that book, or is it just like, it's it on your list?
It's on my list because I needed to finish another game, and I just finished that recently. I
Mm-hmm.
also read so much for my job.
Mm-hmm.
Like I work in a lab, and
That's cool.
for lore keeping, that
Mm-hmm.
I don't often have
Yeah.
time to do it, but I'm really looking forward to it. And Artsy, there's so many, like, this is the thing that I love about lore keeping is that when you learn the story, even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't learn it totally in depth, you can apply it to all these things outside of gaming, and I think make things within how am I trying to say this? I think coming from like a STEM background, and that's incredibly gatekeepy.
Yeah.
Um, Before I even started streaming, I was pretty active in the scientific communication space within like computer science and like chemistry. Most of my friends are also like soft and have like cute aesthetics, but they're in those spaces and
Mm-hmm.
really work hard at um, opening up that space to all kinds of people. And that's really what is like the driving force behind what it is that I do. I'm like, oh, I can do that in the gaming space. Like I did it, in those spaces, and my friends did it. So why not bring it here? And one thing that I really appreciated about one of my friends, Sailor Mercury, she actually, I don't know if you've seen it. It went viral on TikTok. It was a keyboard like keycap set that had a bunch of astrology signs and stuff on it.
It's
Um,
adorable.
yeah, so she's like a mutual friend of mine, and
Mm-hmm.
she's like brilliant and has done all this stuff like in the space, but is super soft and tries to make all learning accessible, and is able to make connections from computer science to things that just regular people would know. And that's what I love about lore keeping is that once we learn the stories and the concepts the way that someone
Mm-hmm.
would take like a lab class, then you can apply that to real things that are relatable for people, and that'll deepen their appreciation for both things, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And like being able to take something like the storyline in a Zelda game and apply that to like someone overcoming like a really difficult time emotionally. Like I don't want to I don't know I don't with content warnings, like I don't want to bring
Oh
up
no,
certain
content warriors are
like
totally fine.
things.
I always
Oh
add
yeah.
it to the front. So whatever you need, it's totally okay.
Yeah, so I've talked to quite a few people about like Majora's Mask, for example. It deals with grief. The whole
Mm-hmm.
game is centered around grieving and loneliness, and I think when you're playing the game, they're not explicit about that, but it's just something that's felt throughout. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that many people that grew up playing that series when they were younger had a difficult time with it, but when they came back to it later, once they had lived their lives, and it just showed them how resilient they had been, and that that they could find community. And that's what I love about this book, The Psychology of Zelda, is that it really goes in depth with those themes that are built into the game
That's
and
cool.
makes people feel not just less alone, but maybe to not have shame around the things that they deal with, because, it's like, hey, you were able to play this game and get through these difficult times. Like, you can do that, in your real life. And but yeah, that's what I really love about lore keeping, is that it's not just talking about the stories of the game. Like, of course, that's a core component of it, but it's really connecting it to things outside of that, and like the people that were impacted by it. And I just think that's really cool that, like when I'm streaming the games, like it's really like goofy and loud and chaotic and just, but when we think about the experience that we all shared, that's the thing that really keeps me going. Yeah, there's a lot of books on Zelda, and they have them too, I think, for Dragon Age, but they might not be ones that you can buy. They might be like ebooks.
That's awesome. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I always if I love a game, I hyperfixate and try to like find as much information as possible. And I know that this is about Zelda, but what I love most and what really tied me into, I think, this community with Animal Crossing is the concept of furusato, which is and I totally just messed up the Japanese, but the the original game designer wanted to create a game that prioritized going back to the village, the nostalgia of what it meant to be part of a community that cared about each other, that the value of a person was not based on the capitalistic, expectations of what they provide to society. And I think that's why Animal Crossing New Horizons just is a continuation 3 years later, is because we created that space of coming back to the village and providing value, not on the basis of how much money you make or how far you've gone education wise, but the fact that you have ideas and you want to share. And that's really it. That's all that matters. And it always kind of like gets me in the heart, feels that people started their journey with a cozy game during a really tumultuous time, and how they've just come to thrive, and that's just really cool. So you did touch a little bit on how lore keeping impacts your gaming experience, but how does it impact your gameplay specifically? I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, it does. I also just really want to pause and show you something that Sailor Mercury made, because she
Sure.
loves Animal Crossing, and I hope she still has copies of this available, because I think you'll love this. It's just right here. And you
Yeah,
say,
no,
you
no,
have it?
go for it. Go for it.
Sorry to put these back on, but it's called slow growth. So she made these, like,
Ooh.
the planters are expensive. Like, I just ended up getting the zine, but it's a zine about her journey with Animal Crossing,
Wow.
and making the ceramics. And she actually talks about that concept that you mentioned, I think, for the original developer.
Yeah,
Oh
for
yeah, Animal
Sato.
Crossing from a game design perspective.
That's
Like,
cool.
I really think that, like, since Animal Crossing is so special to you, it is to me too. Like, New Leaf got me through like content warning depression mention. I had a really, really hard time around like 2014.
Yeah.
And I was working a lot. Like, I worked an incredible number of hours, and I didn't really have time to socialize with people, just because, I was working all day and all night. And by the time I got home, it was like 1 or 2 a.m. And, I didn't want to disturb my roommates. So I just would pop open Animal Crossing New Leaf, like on my bed and in the dark. And um, I had a few, I was in those, I forget what they're called. What was that community? It was like Discord, but not. They had like apps, Amino or something.
I don't know.
Um,
No
but
idea.
I had friends that were like in the UK and stuff like that, and we would just go to Captain's Island together, and that
Oh,
was like my
cute.
socializing. So whenever like, Animal Crossing is very near and dear to me, just for that reason of like community and it being something that everyone is deserving of, and it doesn't matter what you have to bring. It's just,
Yep.
you're just there chilling with your little animal friends. Yeah. That's actually what I streamed too when I met my friends. So
Oh, wow. That's really
yeah, that's how I
cute.
met Valerie. Yeah. Yeah.
So New Leaf specifically, that's how you,
New
or no, New
Horizons.
Horizons, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but sorry, when you said that, I was just
No,
like,
no, no.
oh.
I love
Yeah.
I love the idea that there's a whole underground of people who are really passionate about it. The fact that there's a zine, I'm absolutely going to be linking that in the description below, friends. So,
Yeah.
but going back to what we were talking about, how does lore keeping, what you do, impact your gameplay specifically?
Okay, so great question. So if you were to go on, I don't know what the name of the website is, but there's a way that you can see how long a standard playthrough takes if you're trying to plan
Mm-hmm.
out a stream. So for uh, Ocarina of Time, a first playthrough, if you try to do most of the quests, will take the average person about 60 hours. My first playthrough took me 115 and I didn't do any of the side quests. So I take a long time. My playthroughs are typically very, very slow. But it's because I like pontificate and will go back and explore and then replay a cutscene. Like, thank you to Nintendo for having save states for that game so I could go back if I missed
Mm-hmm.
something. But yeah, it takes me a long time to play games, and especially because I'll often pause the game to talk
Mm-hmm.
um, and theory craft. And I really like that though because I feel like, and this is not a dig at any other creators, and like I think people should play games however makes them happiest and feels the best. I think for me, initially when I was playing through games, I always felt like there was a crunch for me to like be at the same pace or rate of gaming as other people, and that was really stressful. And I just was like, you know what, screw this. I'm just gonna play at my own pace, and just if people want to like go and do other stuff, like that's totally fine. Like they're welcome to do that. But I enjoy the games most when I can really like take my time with them and like really savor that experience because
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of love that got put into the development of these games. And even outside of that, like, I don't want to miss anything. So that's one way that it impacts it. Another way is I think I probably get a little bit more stressed out playing it than maybe the average person, just because I forget to save sometimes,
Oh.
and sometimes I'll get pretty far, like several hours in, and I'm like, oh shoot, like if I die here, like like a rip for the run. But that makes it exciting for me because I do think that being a little bit stressed in a game is like makes me feel alive. And I tend to have the most difficulty not with the combat parts of games, but the staying focused, or like I get lost. Like I don't know if there's a term for being like directionally dyslexic, but I get lost really, really easily. Um so that makes me take like a long time too. So it just everything takes a long time for me
Mm-hmm.
in the games. But I also like really like love my mods because I usually play these games on stream. Like I don't really play games off stream very much because a lot of them have played through the series and they help with spoilers because that's like a big thing. Um, of course, with me being someone that's really passionate about the storytelling, I try to safeguard
Mm-hmm.
what happens in the story. So that was a little tricky for me to navigate when I first started doing this. Is but in a way, the same way that me being a lore keeper has allowed me to feel like I can take up space and like speak my truth, I guess. It's helped me with practicing boundaries with people because I think, especially being femme, like it
Mm-hmm.
can be difficult to feel like grounded and saying like, hey, this is something that I need and I need you to respect that, and not apologizing right away and being like, oh, I'm sorry, but this is what I need, but just like, no, this is like something that I'm asking for. I need you to respect that. So that's how it has impacted my gameplay.
You had mentioned early in this conversation that, especially with the Zelda franchise, I think going back to literally the 80s, with the just varying degrees of how it's played and how it's developed over time, that you had mentioned that it can be really daunting for people to get into the franchise particularly late. I mean, I know that you said that you started with Breath of the Wild and then you kind of went backwards, and I was curious with lore keeping, how does lore keeping, I guess, open up that space for such a long franchise? Because I know that in my case specifically, I started actually going back to the old Animal Crossing games to play it so that I could understand why Animal Crossing New Horizons was so impactful. Is that
Mhm.
a similar way that lore keeping was like that for you for the Zelda franchise?
100%. Yeah. Just to understand how the games were before and trying to make connections with the current era of game. I think
Mm-hmm.
if nothing more, to just give me a deeper appreciation for this series because I know how special, and you probably had a similar experience going through Animal Crossing, like
Mm-hmm.
how special the series is for people. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's going back to me being in STEM. I think that there tends to be like almost a self imposed elitism for folks when they think about STEM versus like other forms of,
Social sciences and stuff, yeah.
you know what I mean? And I
Mm-hmm.
just, especially with art, like it always makes me so sad when people, I don't know how to word this, but I really hope that people are able to empower themselves in creating or just appreciating things that aren't like tied to capitalism because I think part of why STEM gets so much praise is just because it's like seen as like a cool job, but really it originally was just a creative thing that people did to try to understand the world around them the same way that artists, paint or sing or
Mm-hmm.
even now like making memes, I feel like, like I feel like that, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
I
like
understand.
it's a way of connecting and understanding the world around us, like no matter what format it's in. And I I think that that's why I love gaming in general. It's just like, it's people using like their brain and like their heart to like make something that they love, hopefully, and put it out in the world for other people to enjoy it. And I think going back to those earlier games and seeing how things were before and how they have changed or improved or gotten worse, I guess that can be a thing for people too. It just makes me love it more. Like the more that I know, the more that I love and appreciate like the
Mm-hmm.
games and the community that I've gotten from it. Because yeah, like these series have been around for decades and like there's always I love when people come to something new for the first time like like seeing people come. I had played a little bit of I think City Folk was on the Wii, and I played New Leaf, but I didn't play any of those as much as I played New Horizons. And I think just seeing so many people come to Animal Crossing for the first time and get really excited and like, going back to the older games, like I have a friend who went back and it's like speed running the older
Mm-hmm.
games and stuff now. Like it just makes me so happy to like see the richness that these series have. And I think the further back that I go, the more people that I meet, and I think that's like the Gemini in me that's just like just wanting to connect and like talk about things with people. Just like, why do you love this? And I think that's how I feel about
Yeah.
the older
So
series. Yeah.
let's go back to the focus of Zelda with lore keeping. Where do you think, because I know that as we said, Zelda expands back to the 80s, like before I was even born. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious that you started with Breath of the Wild. This is a two-parter. So would you like me to break it up as to two questions instead of having a two-parter? Because I know that some people
I think
kind
a
of start.
two-parter is helpful because then I
Okay.
can think about my
Okay.
answer. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question is how accessible do you feel that Breath of the Wild is to being introduced to the series? And because you started with Breath of the Wild and then moved backward, which game do you suggest to people to get started with the Zelda franchise?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I think I will start with which game
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to answer both of those questions and then
Mm-hmm.
they can expand. I think that Breath of the Wild is, well, I don't think, I know that I recommend people start with Breath of the Wild. And that's for two reasons. One, it's the most easily accessible for folks because I think typically if people are asking me which game, they usually will have a Switch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think mechanically that's going to feel the best out of all of the games. I've played through Breath of the Wild. I played a little bit of Majora's Mask. I played Ocarina of Time and most recently Twilight Princess. And I think I had the least trouble navigating Breath of the Wild. Of course, all those games are old, and I'm sure as you've noticed when going back through Animal Crossing, some of them haven't aged super great as far as like moving around and like the interface, and stuff like that. Breath of the Wild definitely has a lot of issues with accessibility, and I'll get into that. But I do think that that's the best one to start with, especially if you think that you're going to want to get into it for lore keeping. It is set 10,000 years into the future from whichever game. They're very vague about that, but it's kind of a hard reset on the timeline in a way. And I think you'll have the freshest experience if you decide to go back, if you just start there. And then I have like a general list of like, and you should try this next, and this next, and next. But I really do think that of all of the games, that one just feels the best to play, and it gives you that opportunity to really just explore. And I feel like it's the most empowering for people to play, because with some of the older games, they can just feel really challenging because either the controls feel a little bit clunky or the combat is just super duper difficult. Breath of the Wild gives you the opportunity to solve puzzles and go about the combat in a super flexible fashion. Like there are some of my friends who aren't really comfortable with like sword and shield combat because maybe they just aren't mechanically like comfortable with that, but they can use like bombs and like ranged things. Like it just gives you so many different options for play style. And I think you get the most bang for your buck if you start with that. I think that my favorite to play, just based on mechanics, though, if you take out the open world aspect, I really enjoyed Twilight Princess Remastered. Like I played that recently. I'm a little bit biased though, because that was a blueprint for the first Dark Souls game, which is one of my all-time favorite games. So it felt very familiar to me.
Wow, that's cool.
But the combat is a little bit tough for some of the boss fights. That would be like my second recommendation for people, because if they have a Wii U, because the combat in that game is much smoother than Ocarina of Time, unless you just play a lot of retro games. Now, as far as like other forms of accessibility, I love that there are captions for the cutscenes. That's like a big thing for me. I don't love that, and maybe we weren't talking about accessibility in like the general sense, but that's really important for me with games too. I really wish that there were like flashing light settings. I hope that they do that for Tears of the Kingdom. I doubt that they do. Nintendo's not super great about accessibility options. Like I'm sure you know that with like Animal Crossing and stuff too. But yeah, I think the Breath of the Wild is probably the best one to start with.
You've mentioned with the Wii U, have you played Wind Waker? Because I had two people, because I was telling them that I felt kind of overwhelmed by the concept of getting into Zelda. One, because it hasn't yet appealed to me, and after this conversation, it's starting to appeal to me a little bit more. But like trying to get into such a long and beloved series is, as you said, very intimidating. And so I was curious if you had heard about Wind Waker, if that was something that you would recommend.
Yeah, I think so. Unless you have Wind Waker, I wouldn't recommend starting with that, only because there are long stretches in that game where the mechanics are just very frustrating, and I've heard that from many people that have played it. I haven't played it myself yet, like just so like take that with a grain of salt. But I've heard from folks, even folks that love the series, that there are patches that are just super frustrating and they had to put it down. But it's so cute. I love that art style so much. Like it's very like Animal Crossing core, and the music is super adorable. And the story is actually, I feel like, one of the best stories in the Zelda franchise. Like I think it's like, I think people in the lore space tend to dismiss it because they either don't see it as being canonical with the I hate talking about the timeline. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like I acknowledge that it exists, but I just like to be very open to all possibilities. And I think that we can shortchange ourselves by just focusing on that. And I think that Wind Waker. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is a game. I don't know if you'll like it necessarily, but very similar to Wind Waker is Minish Cap, and that's available on the Nintendo Switch Online now on their Game Boy Advance. It's super cute. it was on the Game Boy Advance. The music is great. I love the little like cartoon Link art so much. That's one that I'm hoping to play pretty soon.
Good to know.
But
That's
yeah,
cool.
I think that if you're trying to get into Zelda, Breath of the Wild is also great because you get just like little snippets of the previous games, and then if you're curious about that, you can just go back and look for those games. And I feel like it's kind of like a charcuterie board of the Zelda series. Like, oh, here's all these different things. Like, which one do you want to go in for first? Yeah.
Well, that was something that I recall from the direct with featuring Tears of the Kingdom was that there was a lot of like zoom ins of many different things that were coming back to from the old games. And so, since we're nearing the end of this interview, what do you really hope that Tears of the Kingdom focuses heavily on, or perhaps, clears up some things? And my view about timeline stuff is that since I watch Star Trek, temporal mechanics is a
I love
thing.
Star Trek.
I know, like temporal mechanics is absolutely a thing that you just have to accept that time is fricky and that's it, But
a fellow Trekkie.
I know, yeah, no, I got into Star Trek a couple of years ago, and it's become one of my favorite like franchise, despite
It's
the
so
science,
yeah.
the questionable science and all of that. But I love it. The lore,
Yeah.
as I said, maybe
There's a good book on the physics of Star Trek. Actually, I don't have it anymore because it got messed up when I moved. But I think you would like that. I'll
Oh
send it to
man,
you.
no, like don't ever have me sit with a movie of like James Bond or Star Trek, because when I see explosions that are just out of proportion or in space, I get so mad, and I'm not even in STEM.
No, I mean it's real. It's junky, but it's like camp, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
no, like you
yeah,
appreciate it. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But what do I? You were asking what I
Yeah, so
am
what do you
anticipating?
hope that Tears of the Kingdom focuses heavily on, or perhaps clarifies that was suggested or perhaps left unsaid in previous games? That's a
Oh, that's a
really like
big
mouthy question.
question.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's just there's so many things, but I'll try to pick three.
Hmm.
I am really hoping that Ganon gets a lot of attention because he's been in every Zelda game, I think, except I think he's not in Minish Cap, but he's like the big baddie.
Hmm.
He's like this everlasting, ominous, evil presence in the series. But he's understood to be cursed. And I want to know how he got cursed. I want to
Hmm.
know if we can save him because there he's so I'm sure you've heard the term Triforce.
Hmm.
He has one of the Triforces, just that's like a part of him, and there is a part of me. I'm not again an apologist in that I'm okay with the horrible things that he's done. I just want to
Hmm.
clarify. However, I do think that we can change him. I am down bad on my knees in a target for him, unfortunately. But also, I just think that he's deserving of some more depth to his storytelling. Like I think
Hmm.
that Wind Waker is actually, I think, the most that we get like him as a fully fledged character. Like he's got some really profound cutscenes, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is like a really cute. This is like the cutest Zelda game, but holy crap, like this is a lot, like the storytelling,
Hmm.
and it's like very bleak actually. But yeah, like I want more. I want some Ganon lore. I want some Ganon redemption, possibly. Like I would love to see all of them come together. I really want to learn about the ancient, like the most ancient civilization that's been in Hyrule, which I think are the Zonai. They were first introduced by name in Breath of the Wild, and I won't go more into that because we'll be here for 45 minutes. And I really want Link to be able to take a day off after all of this. Like he's been through a lot. He's been through a lot. Like I want to see him loosen up. Um, and even if that means like doing some things that may be seen as bad, because he's very dutiful. So those are three things. Like I want Link to let his hair loose and like do something a little wacky. I want more Ganon info, and I want to learn about the Zone. Yeah. I
So
also can't wait to make
yeah, go ahead.
everything. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you can't wait to make everything. What were you saying?
Yeah, there's like they're adding like simulator stuff to Tears of the Kingdom. So the Stardew Valley Animal Crossing girlies are gonna eat. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's gonna be
Yeah.
super exciting. So I don't know anything about the previous Zelda like game mechanics with I don't know what they're called, but like, side
The
characters that
abilities?
no,
Oh,
like side characters that come with you. It looks like that there's like a returning group of characters. Are you going to be able to switch between Link and the other characters to fight?
I don't
Like,
know, but that would be so freaking cool.
because like Dragon Age, like being
Yeah.
able to go and cycle through your various characters and to fight them, that'd be really fun. So, do you, how do you feel about the accessibility of Tears of the Kingdom as a first Zelda, like a first time Zelda player?
Oh, I think that any of the modern Zelda games are going to be totally fine to pick up. I think
Hmm.
especially like I think Nintendo was very intentional about when they were okay. Let me calm down so I can answer this question. So, Tears of the Kingdom initially was developed to be like additional DLC for Breath of the Wild, so I feel like it'll
Oh,
feel very similar. Um, it just got delayed and then turned into a whole nother game because they realized like, oh my gosh, we can't cram this into DLC. Like, you know, um, I think that this is probably going to be the most accessible Zelda game ever made because they're adding so many different ways that you can play the game. Like it's not just focused on combat. Like
hmm.
there's a lot of creativity to how you'll be able to go about the puzzles and fighting and stuff like that. So, and also just based on storytelling, Breath of the Wild was set so far into the future that really anything that preceded it, it's not that it's irrelevant. It's just we're in the here and now. So I don't
Hmm.
think that new players would, I think that they would not miss out necessarily. I do always recommend that if you don't think that you'll have time to play at least Breath of the Wild,
Hmm.
watch a playthrough. There's some amazing ones on YouTube. Zelda Universe actually has this wonderful series where they showcase the cutscenes and they have full voice acting. And Nintendo actually just put out a Breath of the Wild story overview. It's about 7 minutes long on their official
Hmm.
channel. So that would be great. And I think at the very least, people should familiarize themselves with the story of Breath of the Wild just so that they're not left wondering like some of the returning characters that we see.
Hmm.
Like in the trailers, like there are quite a few characters that were really important in Breath of the Wild. So I think people will be totally fine starting out with
Hmm.
Tears of the Kingdom as their first Zelda game. That'll actually be amazing to have this first time Zelda, first playthrough while the game is new. I think that's like beautiful. I hope that
Hmm.
people do that. But yeah, at least familiarize themselves with Breath of the Wild.
Knimbley, I told people it's like, Knimbley is probably going to be the person who gets me into Zelda. And I have to say that this hour has been truly delightful. I don't consider myself a lore keeper, but I think the way that I appreciate and love games is it has a very similar mechanic. And so it's really cool that there's a name to my I wouldn't say hyperfixation, but when I love a game, I love a game and I have to know
Yeah.
everything about it. So it has truly been delightful and I'm assuming that you are so stoked for Tears of the Kingdom. Are you streaming that when it comes out? Like the minute you can play it, you're gonna
9
stream it?
p.m. Pacific Standard Time because legally that's okay. It's in the TOS. It'll be released in New York at midnight. So I'm gonna be going to GameStop actually. I have to do something heartbreaking, but I'm gonna be selling my New Horizons Switch so I can get the pre-order for Tears
Oh
of the Kingdom. But it's
wow,
okay. I have another
wow.
Switch and like,
Hmm.
I didn't use it very much and I'm trying to be good about my spending. But yeah, I'm so excited. I got a cosplay and stuff lined up for the premiere, and yeah,
With the
I'm
ears,
just
with the delightful
I
ears.
I wish I had the ears. I might try to. Actually, that's a good idea. Maybe I should try to dye them. I try to keep it a little bit simple for myself because I get easily overwhelmed and
Hmm.
working full time.
Yeah.
Like I usually stream like an hour after I get home from work,
Hmm.
so I wanted to keep it a little simple. I did take a few days off. So I'll be streaming that during the day. But yeah, I'm like Artsy. I'm so grateful that I can experience. I'm like tearing up a little bit, but I'm a crybaby. But I that I can like share in this new experience with people
Mm.
because like the series means a lot. And it's been a long time since there's been a new Zelda game, and I just am so grateful that I get to like have my first playthrough while everyone else is having their first playthrough and like
Yeah.
it's felt like such this like build up like me starting with the series and like playing through the older games in anticipation for this, and now I get to like be a part of that with everyone, and like I'm just so excited for the Zelda community and anyone that's new to the community. Like, please, like, if I think you would enjoy it, and yeah, like I just say go for it if you feel like it, and if you like games that make you feel things, like Zelda will definitely do that. So yeah.
So, Knimbley, that is a great segue. So, how can we find you on the interwebs in preparation for TOK? Because, friends, if you are not following Knimbley over at Twitch, you need to. A delightful space, very comfy and cozy, and accommodating and accessible for everybody. But how can we aggressively promote you during this time?
So yeah, thank you. So you can find me across the internet at knimbley.garden. That has all my socials there, but I do stream on Twitch. I upload lore videos occasionally on YouTube. That's I don't know how the URL works, but it's Knimbley with an X at the end. And I have a Lorekeeping podcast that I started recently called Ethereal Femme. You can find that at anchor.fm/Ethereal Femme. It won't just be about Zelda, but this first season is. And those are the main places you can find me. You can also find me in all of my friends' streams because I love them a lot. And I get to hang out there. That's my socializing.
And I forgot to ask you this. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have somebody that you would like to see on Gamers Gab? And if so, what would the topic be?
I would love to see my friend Drew on Gamers Gab, and I would love to hear him talk about what would I want to hear him talk about? We have very similar interests in games. Like what when you say the topic, what do you mean? Like just
so, like for example, when Valerie had suggested to you, she wanted to hear about Lorekeeping. I've had people. I know that when I had Peyton from Peyton's Corner coming on to talk about how she created a space that went beyond her chronic pain condition into like how why she plays certain games, to Iona, who talks about how she curated her space and just determining how like what games that she plays with her community. So it can really be anything just within the realm of gaming.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. I think it would be nice to hear him talk about how gaming has made a huge like enduring community for him because he plays like a lot of retro games and does speed running and has been doing this for a long time. So it'd be nice to hear how he got started with that and how it's really built out to these like lifelong friendships that he has, and how other people can build that for themselves. Sorry, I got excited and I couldn't say a word. That happens a lot. Specifically for people that are shyer or like have social anxiety, like how streaming can be really empowering.
Absolutely.
And you meet people that will be your friends for a long time. I hope that that's like a condensed version.
No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So, friends, you know the drill. Go follow, subscribe, do all that for this incredible human who is. I'm really excited to actually see your take on Tears of the Kingdom and breaking it down.
I can't wait.
I know. I'm excited for other people, and I may actually be getting Breath of the Wild because of you. So it's all literally your fault. Yes.
Make sure you get the DLC too. It's on sale right now.
Okay.
There's DLC. It's really sweet. It is a little bit challenging, like the combat. I'm not gonna lie to you, but like Artsy, I cried so much. I cry easily, but like it's so good.
It is the good tears. Yeah, no, I'm highly considering. I need to make sure that I have the funds and that I'm financially responsible. But I think because of you, I think I need to give Zelda a chance. So go as a consequence, friends. Go do the due diligence. I'll leave all the links for Knimbley in the description below. And with that, friends, we'll catch you next time. Bye.